it's legal
Oh
in
boy,
like all
this
50
debate is
states,
getting good.
whereas free speech
Chizzy is
protected
absolutely
under the
destroying Rin
Constitution.
Michaelis.
Yeah, but it's not free speech. Again, this is not a free speech issue. This is a
My
platform.
toast
This is
to
not
you,
Well,
the
sir.
public square.
You just believe that a company should do whatever it wants? So,
Yes!
okay, wait a minute. So, another thing that is against the Constitution is slavery. So, could a company own slaves?
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again. Because a vision softly creeping left its seeds while I was sleeping.
Do not forget of who is in possession of you, Zach. Ever since the first time that you shot yourself, you weren't done spreading libertarianism then, and I am not done utilizing you to spread libertarianism now. Yes, man.
Ah, crap. Could you just let Zach do the talking when you two want to talk, Reaper?
Intimidation is part of my forte.
No, it's not that. It's just that your face is so fucking ugly it makes my head hurt, and it makes my eyes hurt. As if Zach's face wasn't, like, incelish looking ugly enough.
I'll show you ugly when I burn your face into the Mexican version of Two-Face.
Ugh, what is the deal with you?
I have some economic leftism that needs responding to. It was so fucking stupid that even Zach shot himself. It's so stupid that we might even need some help responding to it. And guess what? You are the first candidate.
Okay, what is it?
Another thing that is against the Constitution is slavery. So, could a company own slaves?
Oh, fuck, let's just get this over with.
Force a Muslim to bake a cake with Muhammad's face on it? Would we force an atheist to bake a cake for an event the Westboro Baptist Church was holding? Would we force a Jewish baker to bake a cake that was, I don't know, covered with pork and shellfish and that had swastikas on it? No, we wouldn't, and nor should we. And I know there are some of you out there who are going to say that, oh, but if you open up a business, you agree to operate in the public sphere, you just have to accept that you're going to take clients that you're not exactly going to like every time. But why should we have to do that? Especially when you're someone who owns and operates your own small business and you have clients that are asking you to do things that violate your principles when it comes to your religion.
Now, I have no problem with this bit, but I do think that she's going to begin to compare apples to oranges. You know, like the right to refuse service for anybody, for any reason, to what she just said there.
Okay, y'all. I know that I have a bit of a monotone in my voice, but Rin is just ridiculous. Like, at least I try to be expressive. This is one of those moments of when that is most called for that I play the music and the gameplay background footage.
But it lacks nuance to compare the rights to refuse service to this right here. It's just there's discrepancies to this.
In this clip you played, there weren't any discrepancies. Also, you slurred your words near the end, and I couldn't make out what you said for the life of me. And on the subject of freedom of association, there aren't really any ways to have false analogies here.
You know, for example, if your car is out of gas and you just need to be at the nearest gas station at a rural town, if a person refuses you and you're out of gas, that could potentially be life-threatening at a rural town.
On the issue of if a tow truck driver was to refuse to tow your car because of XYZ, well, There are actually plenty of towing services that can cater to rural areas. Technology is a great thing for people to use when they need to find service, whether it be for towing or anything else. The same can be said when it comes to rural travel. In fact, Lyft covers over 80% of the United States. So those 2 points are already refuted, Rin.
Or if a hospital refuses to take roaming because she's mixed race. If somebody refuses to take you because of your skin color, in certain situations that could be life-threatening.
She could go to another hospital, and if that isn't possible because she's in a rural area, technology again can help with the rural healthcare issues that people face in those areas. But it really depends on where in the country she lives. If she lives in a big city like New York, it's not like they have a shortage of hospitals there.
So I just wanted to point out that there are nuances to this, and we are unsure of where to draw the line between freedom and safety, freedom and security.
If you want total security, go to prison. There you're fed, clothed, given medical care, and so on. The only thing lacking is freedom. Also, I don't think there's any line needing to be drawn. If someone doesn't want to serve you, they don't want to serve you, and they shouldn't have to. Unless you've given them your money in this transaction, then they have not violated any of your rights. If you have given them your money, then they are in the wrong, plain and simple.
I wonder if in the future they'll also decide that religious freedom is not a good enough excuse for Christian pastors, reverends, and priests to not provide their services to gay weddings.
I think Millennial is Canadian, but I live in America and we have a separation of church and state. To me, it would be better to focus on the separation of church and states and add that to Canadian laws to protect religious freedom.
Yeah, we have separation of church and state, not church and business. If a business owner wants to have their own religious principles taken to large play as to how they conduct business, well then by every rights they have that right to do so. And by extension, if you are to allow, say, a Muslim baker, for example, to have as many rights as a Christian baker to deny service to anyone that they want to based off of their own religious principle, along with all other religions, well then it is not an establishment of one religion that you are doing there if you are like recognizing all people of all religions to equally conduct their business equally as they see fit.
Okay, so I have to admit I do respect religious rights. I don't always like it being brought up in the conversation as it does muddy the water, but I do think that religious liberties are important in the United States, although they are not under attack. As for Canada, I can't speak to that because I don't live in that country, nor do I care about that country. And as how Canada conducts its laws, that's their business, not ours.
Their cake's a sort of edible form of art, which I think is completely reasonable. Then forcing this baker to bake this cake when he doesn't want to might qualify as compelled speech.
Side note here, I think that Roman Millennial's analogy that she's trying to make up here isn't really applicable and doesn't fit.
Don't we, in a sense, engage in that already? For example, when you go to a public school, you can't call your school teacher a because you would get expelled from school and your parents would yell at you. Your parents aren't going to go to the school teacher and say, hey, my kid has the freedom of speech to call the school teacher a
Again, I don't think roaming's analogy really fits right here because speech and business practices are not really equivalent. And so because in combination of her analogy and Rin's confusion, we have ended up shifting the goalpost. Originally, we were talking about private businesses and how they are supposed to practice, to now how people are supposed to conduct themselves on publicly owned land or buildings and whatnot. I mean, despite whether or not you think that publicly owned buildings should actually be a thing or not, I think that whatever way that people are going to conduct themselves on public property, that should be determined by the local governments as to whether or not you can curse or call people names within a public school or within a public town hall or whatever else have you.
Likewise, a waitress cannot actually, call you a because a waitress would get fired from her job.
Yes, exactly, Rin. We're talking about business rights here. We think that a business owner should have the full right to deny service to anyone that they please, just as much as they should be able to fire their employee for whatever reason that they please. That includes if they find that their employee is being too rowdy and obnoxious and rude.
And not only that, but, it's kind of like, there could be censorship from the government, but there could be censorship from businesses. And if you support censorship, as long as it's coming from businesses and you want absolute freedom from the governments, I do think people can be oppressed by corporations.
Oppressed, quote unquote.
Especially if they have a monopoly. Like Google is basically a monopoly at this point.
I've heard plenty of other people go talking about how most, if not all, monopolies are basically propped up by the government. I haven't looked much into this, so I'm not sure. I would have to look into it to be sure. But Google, I can say for sure, does receive a bunch of government subsidies. And a simple search on Google also shows plenty of other articles that go talking about of how Google does get plenty of government subsidies. So basically, if we were to take the government subsidies away from Google, then they would have less of a stranglehold on the market that they hold, and they would be less of a monopoly, ultimately.
So this is why this is just such a difficult topic, because it just goes over like which is worse, being oppressed by the government or being oppressed by corporations. And is there a double standard between wanting freedom of speech for the government, but being fine with censorship as long as the business is doing it?
That was such a nonsensical and incoherent point, I had a hard time wrapping my head around it. There is no double standard there, because for one, we do not believe that the government deserves freedom of speech. Like, for crying out loud, the government is not a private individual. As far as corporations or businesses censoring whoever is using their platform or internet websites, for the example of YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter, or anything like that, there is a private individual who ultimately owns those pieces of private property. And you only have as much freedom of speech within a person's private property as much as the owner of the private property is willing to grant you. Otherwise, they can just kick you off entirely if they don't like the speech that you are espousing, even though they tell you not to do it.
Because then it's a-okay for YouTube to throttle YouTubers, and YouTubers should respect that YouTube is its own private business and it could censor anybody it likes, because censorship, particularly self-censorship, always happens. A person working at Walmart is expected to self-censor. She has to treat you respectfully or get fired. When you are in school, you engage in self-censorship. You cannot call your teacher a you cannot disrupt a class, or you risk getting expelled. Censorship does happen. The only time you're truly free is when you're at home.
This was a long section of video, so my reply will be a tad lengthy. If you insult your teacher in a private or public school, in both cases you are not being censored. Them removing you from the school is their right, since they have rules and you refuse to follow them. Censorship from businesses isn't as bad as government censorship, since we don't have a right to the platform of those businesses, like YouTube, Google, or Facebook. If we pay our money onto those platforms, we should get it back. But we also always should read the contract and stay up to date on the terms of service. Also, businesses don't have as much power as the state does. The state has killed more people in its entire existence through wars, dictatorships, etc. than corporations could ever do. Monopolies exist when the exclusive possession or control of the supply or trade in a commodity or service. And you also realize that Google and other platforms have government subsidies, right? If they wouldn't get those subsidies, their ability to remain a monopoly would be threatened. They would have to compete against other platforms, and as a result, people could more realistically say, you know what, forget YouTube, or forget Facebook, forget Twitter. Maybe that could work out. And As for Gab, maybe it could work out if they didn't have Nazis running all over the platform. I'm for free speech, just like Gab is, but I think at some point, it's like, if these people are making your product unusable, you have the right to remove those people if they're making it unusable for everybody. As that is their right to determine their terms of service, that is their right to decide how they will run their platform. If they're not running it in the way their users want and their users leave, they will be forced to do something different. At the end of the day, they have the right to determine their terms of service. If you break it, they can remove you. They don't even have to have a reason. It's their platform, their private property. As long as you're not scammed out of money, your rights aren't being infringed upon. And yes, we self-censor all the time. I self-censor when I'm at work, at school, with friends and family, or just in general public. You don't hear me whining about it.
Though, and this is where I might lose some of you if I haven't already, I'm actually gonna take this a step further. I actually believe that business owners should have the right to refuse service to anybody for any reason. No, please, just hear me out. I am not pro-discrimination. I don't think it's a good thing. In fact, I think it is an immoral thing to not want to serve someone based on them being gay or black or Muslim or whatever. Discrimination is not a good thing, but what's an even worst thing is someone being compelled by the state to provide services when they don't want to.
What if a school doesn't want to take black kids, but it's, you're in a rural area and you can't really get to a different school? If you can't get to a different school and the only school around hates black people and refuses to take black people, you would grow up being uneducated, and in that case, it will cause a lot more harm than good. So there are going to be cases where discrimination is going to would cause lots of chaos and disorder in society.
You do realize online schooling is a thing, right? And you also understand that there are efforts in the United States to improve broadband internet service in rural America. And there are efforts throughout the developing world to provide them internet access as well. So this doesn't just apply to the United States. So if a school refuses to serve your child or help them with their education because they are racist, this is the best opportunity to turn away from them and head toward online schooling.
Saying that you must provide this labor even if you don't want to, yeah, you're still being paid for it, but that's kind of indentured servitude.
Well then, there are 70% of indentured servants in America, because 70% of U.S. employees hates their jobs. So it's kind of like, are you an American? Do you hate your job? Congratulations, all 70% of you are all indentured servants.
Are you serious?
I can't even with this amount of stupid right now. Jeez. Like, no, it's not indentured servitude when somebody is not happy with their job. What is indentured servitude, or slavery rather, is when that you start applying force to somebody that they ought to stay at their job. Like, even economic leftists, actual leftists, Bernie bros, don't even stoop to this low when it comes to the stupid scale. Like, for fuck's sake, at least the logic that they apply is, oh, I am forced by my own life circumstances to work this low-wage job, so therefore I am forced to take this job. At least they have that logic behind them, even though I completely disagree with it, because that ain't force. What is force is when that a business owner forces you to work for them. That would be actual slavery right there, and coercion. But this, just because they are not happy with their own fucking job, doesn't mean that they are indentured servants. It doesn't mean that they are actually forced to work at their job, for crying out loud. Like, Rin, do you actually think about what you're about to say before you actually say it?
Millennial, I am really happy that you got to make a career making YouTube videos. But not everybody is lucky enough to do a career that they love and are passionate about. Many people would prefer to make a living doing YouTube videos, being an actor, being a professional singer. There are people out there who try their best to be professional singers, but are stuck being trash collectors. People do jobs that they don't like. That doesn't make them servants.
Holy crap, you're gonna actually make me defend roaming millennial. She did not say if you don't like your job, you are forced.
Saying that you must provide this labor even if you don't want to, yeah, you're still being paid for it, but that's kind of indentured servitude.
And parts of, I think that's parts of the problem with millennials is, wanting to do things that they love. And therefore thinking that communism is the answer because they have to take the jobs that are available over something that they are passionate about. But the problem is an overwhelming majority of Americans are passionate about being a singer, being a dancer, being an actor, being a professional football player, being a professional soccer player. That is what people want to do. And she's saying that if you do something and you don't really want to do it, then you're a servant. And that's not how it works.
Except in roaming's argument, it's sound, since the state will force you to bake the cake, or face fines, or they will shut you down. People not liking their jobs. Well, no one is forcing them to do those jobs. Contrary to what communists and socialists believe, no one is forcing you to do the job. If you don't want to do your job, be my guest. But they don't have to pay you, and they can fire you. And being a singer, dancer, and whatnot is not a stable form of income unless you're famous. Thus, you shouldn't try to live off of it.
What is the difference between roaming millennial statements and Marina shut up statements? When Marina shut up is like, fuck capitalism, I love my cushy job at everyday feminism, and I do not want to work a job at McDonald's or Subway. If I work at Subway, I'll be an indentured servant. No, I must keep my cushy job at everyday feminism. Can't agree with roaming millennial without subsequently agreeing that Marina Shut Up is oppressed because she might lose her job at everyday feminism and might have to do a job that she doesn't like, such as working at McDonald's, and do things that she just doesn't want to do, like not tell her customers that they're working for the patriarchy.
There is a huge difference. Marina isn't being forced by the state to work at a stable job. The state would force roaming millennial to bake a cake, and if she refused to give it to somebody, she would be given a fine, or possibly worse. And I think you know that, or at least you should know the difference. And the one thing that makes me absolutely despise communists and socialists and people that are sock dems because they are very close to socialists is that they think life is supposed to be easy. It's not going to be. There are challenges that we will face growing up and when we leave home, and if you go to college and you get a job, it's really pathetic. These people think life isn't supposed to be challenging. It will be, no matter what you do.
Thank you for responding to that one part right there, man. I was just recovering from the vitriol that I was showing a little bit earlier.
I don't want to serve you, and it's nobody's business why.
And if YouTube and Facebook wants to censor you, it's none of your business why.
Wow, Rin actually got it half correct right there. Like, I wouldn't have worded it the exact way that Roaming Millennial did right there, because it was almost like as if she was implying that a person cannot even disagree and speak their disagreement with a business owner and their business decision that they make with their business. But ultimately, yeah, if YouTube does want to kick somebody off of their platform, well then by rights they can do so, because they're still technically a private entity. But I would take away all the subsidies and all the other government benefits that YouTube and Google ultimately does get in the end, just so that if they ultimately fail by their own negative decisions, that they ultimately fail and not get saved from their own failure by the government and ultimately our taxpayer dollars.
if YouTube and Facebook wants to, censor Sargon, or if Twitter wants to permanently suspend, Sargon, Milo, Bugsy King, hey, that's their prerogative, and it's none of your business why they want to do that. It's just their business, and you have no reason to complain about it.
Ultimately, it is their prerogative, yes, but a person also has the right to complain and protest a person's business decision. That does not contradict the idea of private property rights and freedom of association with the business and whatever customer they want to deal with.
Damn right,
Oh, and I forgot to mention something. These businesses, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, they're all pretty much monopolies. But please do not complain about YouTube, censoring videos. It's their business, not yours. It doesn't matter that they're monopolies and that they control everything. It's their business, and if they do something that they don't want to do, that's the exact same thing as Mark Zuckerberg being oppressed.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
Once again, they are able to be monopolies because they have the subsidies required to be that way. Don't give them subsidies and we can solve the problem at hand.
A printer doesn't want to print what they deem to be, anti-male propaganda, should they be forced to. There are so many different ways that the issues of compelled labor and compelled services could end up affecting us in the future, and personally, I think it's safest to always err on the side of freedom, and yes, I know how cheesy that sounds, but
Oh, no, they shouldn't be forced to, but they could always work somewhere else. Like if you're working for Fox News, you cannot complain that you are forced to write something that is right-wing. And if you are working for Everyday Feminism, you cannot complain that you're writing something that is left-wing. You just gotta look for a job elsewhere.
Holy crap, she has unironically actually gotten it right again. Yes, a business has the full right to associate with anyone they want to as far as employment goes, just as much as they have the right to associate with whoever they want to when it comes to a business transaction. They're the same thing, basically. There isn't a contradiction of principles right there, Rin.
And now we're back to the topic of, censorship from a job versus censorship from the government. And, both of these things could be bad. Oppression from a company versus oppression from the government, because companies could always have monopolies. So in the end, I can't really decide which is worse, being oppressed by a company that has a monopoly and decides to own everything, or being oppressed by the government. But you guys could let me know what you think. Is, being oppressed by a company worse, or being oppressed by the government worse? Well, what if the company has a monopoly and they own everything, and you can't go anywhere else without the same rules being enforced?
They shouldn't be forced by the state to serve someone, that's the point. If they get fired or they quit, that's fine. But we are talking about business owners, Rin. Censorship by the state or your job? Where do you mostly self-censor? The state should be the answer, obviously. Your other points that you mentioned in that cutaway have already been addressed several times in this video. I'm not repeating myself.
Phew, that bit of stupidity is finally done. Thank you so much for helping me out, S-Man. This is just hard for me to get through, and I really appreciate the help. But I'm afraid that we aren't done yet, folks. This is only part 1 right here. Part 2 will be me and S-Man collaboratively responding to Rin's comments regarding freedom of association in her debate against Tizzy that she recently had in last year of November. So stay tuned for that.
You just believe that a company should do whatever it wants? So,
Yes.
Okay, wait a minute. So, another thing that is against the Constitution is slavery. So, could a company own slaves?
Oh God, please help us. If you guys like this video, hit that thumbs up button below. If you have some criticisms to me or think there are some areas where I can improve, comment them down below. And if you want to see more
Dark, edgy content like this,
response videos, news shows, hangout streams, well then hit that subscribe button, cause I'm your man. Hope to see you all in the next video. See you all later, and God bless.